20 years ago, the Chinese city of Shanghai looked like this. And now, just 20 years later, it looks like this. It has morphed into a metropolis with one of the most spectacular skylines in the world. But this type of transformation isn't exclusive to China. It's happening everywhere. Many places in India and Africa are transforming lush green wildernesses into mega-sized cities to rival Shanghai. But transformation takes time. It takes money. And most of all, it takes resources. The most important resource? It's not metal, or wood, or oil. It's sand. Now, you'd probably imagine that sand is abundant, but you'd be wrong. The world, strange as it may seem, has a shortage of sand. When you first think of sand, you probably think of camels, or the Middle East, or a guy lost in the desert about to die of thirst. But sand is closer than you think. It's in the device you're using to watch this video. It's in your apartment, and it's used to make roads. Sand is the raw material used for making computer chips, glass, solar panels, and lots of other everyday stuff. But it's mostly used for the creation of construction materials, such as concrete. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, how is there a sand shortage when 33% of Earth's landmass is covered in desert? That's because desert sand doesn't bind easily, making the majority of the world's sand useless. Sand used for construction instead mainly comes from riverbanks and beaches. Less than 5% of the world's sand is suitable for use in construction. Because of this, Dubai, which sits in the middle of a huge desert, had to import sand from Australia to build its artificial islands and skyscrapers. Sand being used for construction dates back all the way to the ancient Egyptians. The difference is our version of pyramids are skyscrapers. Skyscrapers are the pinnacle of urban development, and not only because the tallest buildings get the most recognition, but because the higher the building, the more people you can fit in it. And that's why we build upwards. But sometimes we have to build outwards. This process of building outwards is called land reclamation. Land reclamation is a pretty simple concept. It's the process of creating new land by adding sand to the sea floor. Countries add sand to the sea in order to extend the size of their cities and countries. They essentially increase how much land they have by extending this land into the sea. Countries such as Japan, South Korea, and the Netherlands have all reclaimed land. So too have Dubai. Dubai created artificial islands to increase tourism, exhibit their wealth, and march their city onto the world stage. But some countries, like Bangladesh, need to undergo land reclamation out of necessity. With a population of 168 million people living in an area the same size as the state of Montana, land reclamation has become essential for Bangladesh. Bangladesh has already reclaimed 621 square miles, and they have plans to add more than 1,700 square miles of land. Singapore is another country with a swelling population but limited land resources. The founders of Singapore identified this problem and started a land reclamation project just 2 years after their independence. Since then, Singapore has expanded its landmass by almost 25%. But increasing the size of a country by 25% takes a lot of sand. And Singapore has used so much sand that it ran out of the stuff decades ago. Singapore has therefore sourced much of its sand from Indonesia, Vietnam, Cambodia, and Malaysia. But eventually, this unquenchable thirst for sand created huge environmental stress for its neighbors. All three countries banned sand exports to Singapore. But that didn't stop Singapore from getting its sand. It just stopped them from always getting their sand legally. Sand is in such high demand that it is worth robbing. In Malaysia, dozens of officials were charged with allowing illegally mined sand to be smuggled to Singapore. In Jamaica, illegal sand miners stole an entire beach. A stretch of 1,300 feet of sand was stolen from the Coral Spring Beach in Trelawney. Authorities believe the sand was sold to rival resorts. But the biggest perpetrators are the sand mafia in India. They've killed civilians, reporters, police, and government officials, all for sand. Sand mining, at current levels, is having a major effect on the environment. Sand from China's largest freshwater lake, Lake Poyang, and sand from the connected Yangtze River supplied most of the sand needed to build the Shanghai skyline, and that skyline landscape has completely changed. But so too has the natural landscape. The mouth of the Yangtze River is now wider, which drains more water from Poyang Lake. This makes the lake more susceptible to damaging droughts. Another major, and majorly affected, Asian river is the Mekong River. The Mekong River runs through 6 countries, and 60 million people rely on its water. But sand mined from it has lowered the levels of the river by up to 3 feet in parts of Vietnam and Cambodia. This is causing riverbanks to collapse, ruining crop fields, and pulling down houses. Vietnamese officials estimate that 500,000 people need to be relocated from the Mekong River Delta, and this is only the beginning. In Vietnam, the demand for sand is hugely exceeding the country's reserves. Between 2016 and 2020, there was demand for around 2.2 billion cubic meters of sand. But the nation's total reserves sit at just a little above 2 billion cubic meters. It's estimated that the country will soon run out of construction sand. Sand mining also wipes out marine life, which decimates the livelihood of local fishermen. These newly unemployed fishermen are often left with no choice but to start working for the sand mining companies who have sabotaged their jobs, creating a vicious cycle. Together, China and India have increased the demand for sand to unprecedented levels, and they're not even close to finished. China have used more sand in 3 years than America used in the entire 20th century. But this demand for sand is still projected to increase exponentially faster than the demand for any other resource, and that includes crude oil. Lots of emerging nations in Africa and Asia are now developing a mad lust for more sand. As of 2019, according to the World Bank, Tuvalu's economy is growing at 9.8%, Rwanda's is growing at 9.4%, Ethiopia's is growing at 8.3%, and Bangladesh is growing at 8.2%. These emerging economies are going to need sand, just like China and India need sand. As these economies grow, the rural people of these nations will begin looking for better economic opportunities. These people will therefore relocate to cities. These cities will therefore need to get bigger, and will soon start looking just like Shanghai. But sand isn't just used for creating new buildings. It's also used for maintaining old ones. This largely isn't a problem for China and India because their construction effort is fairly new. But for older superpowers, it absolutely is. The American Society of Civil Engineers estimate that America needs to spend $4.5 trillion to improve the whole country's infrastructure. This includes buildings, roads, and airports. And all of this improvement requires more sand. Growing economies need sand to grow, and strong economies need sand just to maintain. And this growing need for more sand means a growing burden on the environment. But in spite of this, we can't simply give up the development of cities in order to protect the environment. Because while the environment is of huge importance, so too are cities. Cities are important for human advancement in many social, economical, and psychological ways. People work best in cities. People often live best in cities. We benefit from each other through cooperation and co-living. That's why you probably live in a city. And cities are great places for business. Employers can easily recruit employees and specialized skilled workers in cities thanks to their large populations. All of this cooperation leads to higher productivity, higher wages, better economies, and a better way of life. That's why between 1928 and 2018, the number of the world's so-called megacities, which is defined as a city with over 10 million inhabitants, has grown from 10 to 33. This is estimated to grow to 43 megacities by 2030. Currently, the world's urban population is growing by 65 million people per year. That's equal to adding 8 New York cities to the planet every single year. So, while this thirst for sand is being driven by companies and corporations, it's also being driven by the human desire to live in cities. In short, it's being driven by all of us. Human advancement has come and continues to come at a great cost to the environment. This endless search for sand impacts rivers, seas, lakes, and wildlife. It also affects the poorest people of the world as their jobs are lost and their settlements are destroyed. But sand is essential and important. The only change we can hope for in the pursuit of sand is how and where we source it. Scientists are currently working on many ways to produce sand artificially, through methods involving recycled glass and recycled concrete, and by using clay as an alternative. If these endeavors work out, we will be able to build and maintain the world in a more sustainable and less harmful way. And we can continue to make societies bigger and better without destroying other parts of the world we live in. Thanks everyone for coming down the YouTube rabbit hole with me. I hope you enjoyed the trip. Please like this video. But most of all, please comment. The YouTube algorithm really likes comments. It's the best way to support the channel. And it's the best way for you to tell me what video you'd like to see next. I'm working on many more great videos to come, so make sure you subscribe and you won't miss out.